Okay, so you know how it is. You're scrolling through the news, right? And then boom, you see a headline that makes you do a double take. Like, wait, what? Did I read that right? It feels like people outside the US have been having a lot of those moments lately.
Yeah, it seems like some recent conversations happening here have been raising eyebrows internationally.
Hmm.
And that's what you're diving into today. We're looking at how the world is reacting to some of the things being said here in the good old US of A, at least according to this Ring of Fire YouTube video we found.
So this video basically zeroes in on this idea of the US potentially, annexing places like Greenland, the Panama Canal, even tossing around the idea of Canada becoming, what, the 51st state? Wild stuff.
It definitely grabs your attention. Now, to be clear, we're not here to debate the logistics or the legality of any of that. That's a whole other can of worms.
Right, right. We're more interested in the global reaction to these ideas as presented in this video. What are people outside the US thinking and saying about all this? Because let's be real, these aren't exactly small potatoes we're talking about.
No, not at all. And the video really emphasizes that. It starts by laying out some specific statements attributed to Donald Trump about these, let's call them territorial ambitions. It talks about him expressing a desire to annex Greenland, to annex the Panama Canal, and even musing about Canada becoming a U.S. state.
So they're putting these statements front and center, saying they're already having a negative impact on how the U.S. is viewed internationally, regardless of what was actually intended.
Exactly. The video argues that it doesn't really matter if these were serious proposals, negotiating tactics, or just, off-the-cuff remarks. The point is, they're being heard.
Yeah.
And the international community is paying attention.
And not necessarily in a good way.
Right. Well, that's what the video suggests. It claims that these pronouncements are making the U.S. into a bit of a laughingstock globally. It paints a picture of world leaders and everyday folks in other countries reacting with amusement, even disbelief, to the idea of American expansionism in this day and age.
So, the U.S. is stuck in this, I don't know, like a manifest destiny time warp. That's got to sting a little, right?
It's definitely not a flattering portrayal. But what's interesting is the video doesn't just focus on the laughter. It actually suggests that maybe we should be taking that laughter a bit more seriously.
Okay, how so? I mean, laughter is better than outright hostility, right?
Maybe, but the video brings up this concern from national security experts who say this initial amusement could actually be a precursor to some real anger and resentment down the line.
So they're saying that even if people are laughing it off now, the underlying reasons for that laughter could lead to some serious diplomatic headaches for the U.S. later on.
Precisely. Because that laughter might stem from a perception that the U.S. is disrespecting international norms, disregarding the sovereignty of other nations, and acting like it can just take what it wants.
And that's not exactly a recipe for smooth international relations.
Not at all. And, the video then goes on to tackle this image of the U.S. as this big, strong, tough, go-it-alone superpower.
Yeah.
It basically says, hold on a minute, that's not how the world actually works.
So it's pushing back against this idea of the U.S. as a lone wolf, totally self-reliant and calling all the shots.
Exactly. It argues that American strength and security are actually deeply dependent on its relationships with allies around the world.
Yeah.
And that trying to act unilaterally without considering those partnerships would be both unrealistic and ultimately damaging to U.S. interests.
So no man is an island, even if that man is a superpower.
Right. And to illustrate this point, the video brings up a really interesting example. Greenland.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Greenland, the land of ice and U.S. military bases.
Exactly. The video highlights the fact that the U.S. has military bases in Greenland, and that access to these strategically important locations depends entirely on the agreement and cooperation of Denmark, which governs Greenland.
So we're relying on another country's goodwill to maintain a key part of our national security infrastructure.
Precisely. And the concern raised is that if the U.S. keeps alienating its allies with this kind of talk and these perceived actions, those allies might just say, enough is enough, you're on your own. And then what?
Yeah, not a good situation. So it's not just about keeping things friendly. There are real strategic implications to consider here.
Absolutely. And the video doesn't stop there. It extends this idea of interdependence beyond military matters to the economic sphere, focusing specifically on the relationship with Canada.
Right, Canada. Our neighbors to the north, eh? They're not just about maple syrup and hockey, are they? What kind of economic ties does the video highlight?
It points out that Canada plays a crucial role in supplying the U.S. with both electricity and oil. Essential stuff,
Yeah, we kind of need those to keep the lights on and the cars running.
Exactly. And the argument's pretty straightforward. If relations with Canada go south, so to speak, because of proposals like annexation, well, there could be some serious economic repercussions.
Like, what? Higher energy prices.
Potentially. The video suggests that Canada might choose to limit or even cut off these essential resources in response to U.S. actions. And that could lead to a whole host of problems, including higher costs for American consumers, like, yeah, you guessed it, higher gas prices.
So not only could we be jeopardizing our national security, but we could also end up paying more at the pump. Not exactly a winning combination.
Not at all. And then the video moves on to the Panama Canal, another territory that's been mentioned in these discussions.
Right, the Panama Canal, another crucial piece of global infrastructure. Didn't the U.S. have a hand in building that?
Yes, the U.S. was instrumental in building and funding the Panama Canal, but here's the catch. Panama owns it.
So that complicates things a bit.
It does. And the video expresses concern that alienating Panama through aggressive rhetoric or actions could lead them to restrict access to the canal.
And what would that mean for, well, everyone?
It could lead to significant disruptions in global shipping, potentially causing delays in driving up the costs of goods worldwide.
So again, it's not just about hurting someone else's feelings. There are tangible economic consequences to consider.
Exactly. The video really drives home the point that seemingly outlandish ideas can have very real and negative consequences for ordinary people, both in the U.S. and around the world.
So putting it all together, what's the main takeaway from this Ring of Fire video? What's the big worry about the U.S. potentially alienating its allies and other nations with this kind of annexation talk?
The biggest concern is that losing the trust and cooperation of our allies would significantly weaken the U.S. in terms of national security and its ability to address global challenges. The video basically argues that in today's interconnected world, no nation, no matter how powerful, can operate effectively in isolation.
So it's a bit like that old saying, united we stand, divided we fall.
Yeah, you could say that. And the video stresses that ultimately, the U.S. itself would suffer the most from the negative consequences of strained international relations caused by these kinds of pronouncements.
So, to sum up, this deep dive into the Ring of Fire video has highlighted that these recent statements about potential territorial ambitions, whether serious or not, are being viewed negatively internationally. And while the initial reaction might be laughter, the video warns that this could easily turn into anger, leading to potential damage to U.S. national security and our economic well-being because, let's face it, we rely on global cooperation.
And that brings up a really interesting question for all of us to think about. Given how interconnected everything is, as highlighted in this video, how much weight should we give to international reactions when we're making decisions about national rhetoric and policy?
It really makes you think about the balance between what plays well at home versus how those same messages might be perceived and received on the world stage. Definitely food for thought.
Absolutely. And it encourages us all to dig a little deeper, to explore the nuances of international relations, and to recognize that what we say and do here at home can have ripple effects far beyond our borders.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.